Otangelo from Brazil.
Yes, hello.
Hello, how are you? You're on Talk Heathen with Jamie and Stephen. Had to say it that way because it rhymes.
I'm fine, thanks. And you guys. Okay, I would like to ask you following. Let's suppose that you arrive at the library and there you find the book. You sit down and open the book. There is no author. You don't know who wrote the book, but on the first pages you see a blueprint, a precise instruction manual to make a factory. And then you look further in the book.
Sorry, Otangelo, you're kind of cutting in and out a little bit. We see that the blueprint does what?
You see a blueprint of a factory, a drawing how to make a specific factory in that book, okay? And then you look further and you see the factory precisely made upon the instructions of that blueprint.
Okay.
But there is no author whatsoever about who drew or made the blueprint, and neither who made the factory.
And yes?
And now the question which you will ask to yourself, you have two options here. You have to ask yourself, was the blueprint and the factory pictured in the book rather made by intelligent beings, or was it rather the product of random, unguided events? What do you think is a more probable inference?
Can I ask you a straight question which approaches this obliquely? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'll leave the straight questions to you and I'll take the gay ones. Go.
Well, there you go.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask whether or not you accept evolution by natural selection?
I think at this moment, I am asking you, what is the better inference and explanation?
Otangelo, you need to answer his question.
If you can just answer my question, because it allows me to understand how best to approach this topic with you. Because what you presented was essentially your own rendition of Paley's Watchmaker analogy. The difference being is that with Paley's Watchmaker analogy, it basically goes as follows. If you were walking across a beach and you found a pocket watch on the floor, you would know that an intelligent creator made it simply by virtue of it being complex. It's similar to what your argument was about, hey, look at these signs of complexity. Surely there was an intelligence behind it. And it's a false analogy fallacy coupled with a black and white fallacy. And the black and white aspect is that you said that we have two options, which wasn't justified. And this is why I asked about evolution by natural selection, because that's the third option and it tends to be the one that's correct. But here's an example of a black and white fallacy so you can see how this fallacious way of thinking is incorrect. You know the pyramids in Egypt? So my question...
Can I answer to you why I think it's not a black and white fallacy?
Okay, you go for it. We go that way.
Because biological cells and the origin of life has nothing to do with evolution. Evolution depends on DNA replication.
Yeah.
And you have to explain DNA replication as the origin of abiogenesis. And you cannot explain the origin of life with evolution.
So you're right to distinguish the differences between evolution by natural selection, because evolution just means change over time, and the best theory that we have is natural selection. And you're right to distinguish that from abiogenesis, which is how single-celled life basically emerges. Because the reason I say single-celled is because we had single-celled life on Earth for, I think it was something near about 2 billion years before we have multicellular. So you're right to distinguish between the two, and they're different topics. The thing is, we know a hell of a lot about evolution by natural selection. It informs basically all of the advancements that we've made in medical fields, honestly, in so many fields, evolution by natural selection is predicated upon. Whereas we know very little about abiogenesis. Sorry, one second. So we know very little about abiogenesis, but we know a hell of a lot about evolution.
I don't know your name.
My name is Stephen.
Stephen. Okay, Stephen. Do you know that science has figured out the minimal necessity of parts to start life?
No,
and there is a science.
No, we haven't.
No.
That is. I forgive me for cutting you off. It may seem rude. We don't know this. For one, we haven't. Honestly, if you look at the grand cosmos around us, we have basically put a cup in the ocean, and we've looked at it and went, "Yep, no whales," because that's basically how we're operating at the moment. We know nothing about so many things. There may be silicon-based life, for example.
Silicon-based life is not possible.
How do you know this?
Known by science.
So
life is only possible carbon-based.
I
Bold
come back
assertion,
to my assertion that the minimal cell size that we know of.
Can you justify that assertion? Could you please try to justify that assertion? How you know
life,
for a fact that we cannot have silicon-based life? How do you know that?
Because the bones, they are unstable.
Yeah, but why do organisms need bones? Why can't entities not have bones?
You cannot. You need amino acid backbones based on carbon.
No, carbon-based life needs amino acid. Silicon-based life could operate under a rubric that is so different to what we're used to.
Well, there is no evidence, Stephen, that life is possible based on silicon.
But that's not how you come to a logical conclusion about what is and isn't possible.
So I'm with you. You get this position where you say that we have to say that we've not observed it. So the default position is to say that we believe, not know, we believe that it's probably not the case. But that's on incomplete information.
Without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. If there is no evidence that life based on silicon is possible, then there is no reason to stick to that.
But here's the thing: I'm
for belief that it could be possible. But as I say,
Otangelo, I think you missed the last part of what he said and the point that he was making.
I'm not claiming that it is the case that there's life that's based on silicon. I would have a burden of proof to substantiate. It's an extraordinary claim, and as you just said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But you are actually saying that it's not the case, which equally has a burden of proof that is very, very hard to fulfill. And when I'm asking you to fulfill it, you're just saying that we haven't seen it, therefore it's true.
Silicon is not producing stable molecules, so it is not possible to make life based on silicon. This is science. This is not my assertion. This is what science.
It is an assertion, and that's not how science comes to conclusions at all. And so there's a fundamental problem here, which is when there's insufficient data and we don't have an understanding of how something could happen. It's the reason why scientists don't say, "Oh, we've definitely figured everything out." They don't even say that about evolution because they couch what they say in scientific terms that don't assert certainty, like the statements you are making. So I would ask that if you're making statements, particularly ones that are as bold and absolute as the ones you're making, which is, "Oh, it is impossible to have something that we would call life based on silicon," that you not say, "And science as a single entity agrees with me," because a more accurate way of describing that would be, based on our understanding of life and silicon and the way that it forms, it seems unlikely that there would be something that we would call life based on silicon rather than carbon.
Okay, so we agree on that. Can we agree on that it is unlikely?
Can you, do you understand the point that I'm making with my statement? Because it's not about silicon. It's about the way that you are communicating generally, and I think under that, the way in which you're coming to conclusions.
Yes, I mean, we can just stick to unlikely or more likely. I like this approach.
Okay.
Cool.
If I can take us back to where it seems the essence, the crux of your call was coming from, which is the irreducible complexity, as it's written down here. What you essentially presented is a teleological argument, and you're seeing complexity, and you're saying that either one, there's an intelligence that intended for that to come to fruition, or two, it was random chance. Is that a fair and accurate way of presenting your argument, perhaps more succinctly?
Yes. My claim is that we have just two options to explain the origin of life, two mechanisms. One, chance, the second one, design.
So this is...
evolution is excluded because evolution only starts when life started and when DNA replication starts.
But the thing is you're not looking at rubble, you're looking at an entire building. That's what's interesting you. That's where you're getting the complexity from. That's where you're getting the attribution of a designer. And this is the difference, because while abiogenesis will have this situation where single-celled organisms are proliferated, they're created, if you will, and we don't know the ins and outs of it. The equivalent of the building that you're referring to, or the pocket watch, is like the human eye, or it's the human hand, or it's a squirrel's nuts. You know, because what I'm saying is that's where the complexity is, right? That's the equivalent of the building.
Complex factories.
But what I'm driving at here, if you just wouldn't mind, is that when we look at the complexity of, let's say, a chimpanzee's elbow, it's incredibly complex, and it gives the impression that there must have been a conscious, intelligent designer that wanted it to be that way because of its complex structure. This is why I brought up evolution by natural selection, because as it turns out, we have a way in which that can occur that correlates with all of the objective and verifiable evidence that we have, and it does not necessitate a conscious mind. So when you're talking about this building, just one second, I promise I'll let you go on, but when you're talking about this building, which is the equivalent of the pocket watch, that is where you're seeing the complexity, and you're saying that one, it's either a designer, or two, it's random chance. And I'm telling you that we know, luckily, in this day and age, that evolution by natural selection can do it, and it's not conscious.
I told you, to explain the origin of life, you cannot bring into the game evolution.
The point that Stephen is making here, Otangelo, is that you are bringing evolution into the game when you're saying it's complex. The complexity that arises as the result of evolution by natural selection. The chimpanzee, all of the complicated things that you would possibly give in biology are the result of evolution by natural selection acting on very, very, very simple one-cell organisms. So if you're going to talk about how complicated the origins of life are, the thing that you're talking about existing is a one-cell organism at best.
Or put it this way, just because I think I promise I'll let you talk, but just put it this way. You know how you were talking about the building? The reason why that is analogous to an elbow is because of the complexity behind it. If you was just saying there's a pebble, then your argument with it correlating with abiogenesis would be fair, but then you wouldn't have the thing that you need, and that is the thing that looks like there's design.
Well, single cells are extremely complex factories, and the origin of
so
life,
a rock.
if we suppose... No.
The factory parts of that single cell evolved over time. So if you're going without the evolution, it didn't have all of the various parts of an organic cell that we know today.
Well, as I told you, science knows the smallest living single cell is a mycoplasma, and it has about 200 genes, and it needs many, many different functionalities. Yep. And what has to be explained is how these functionalities, also self-replication, could have started without evolution. Evolution is not an explanation for the origin of life. Evolution depends on DNA replication.
Yes, it's an explanation for the complexity that results after the creation of life. So the water cycle in pick your favorite geographic region is also incredibly complex and involves many components, etc. Was that intelligently designed? There's lots of ways of looking at something going, wow, there are lots of parts involved here.
We could even do it with the pebble, right?
Yeah, a single atom is incredibly complex. Why not start there and say, therefore, God created everything?
As I told you, cells are factories, not in a figurative sense, but in a literal sense.
So I think you're missing the point here. Unfortunately, Otangelo, because we're swapping in and out, I'm going to have to move on. I really do hope that you call back next week as well, because I think Eric would do this. Sorry to cut you off.
Not at all.
Additionally, you've been talking about how science knows all of these things. If you can get science to call in next week, that will be good. We can have like a three-way conversation. But hopefully we'll be able to talk online. I know you sent me a message. And we'll talk to you next week. I hope you have a good day.
I would also add thank you for the call.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.